The new 3.5 Abyss cycle is out. Not a lot of people are quite happy with the current setup, specifically the third chamber, and it's understandable as to why. That stupid Wenut. So today I'm going to talk about each floor a little bit in detail, which elements I recommend to bring on which half, and at the end I'll give my thoughts on this Spiral Abyss cycle as a whole. Now before I start, I assure you that there are going to be a few tryhards that will say something like, I can clear this Abyss cycle with 2 characters while blindfolded. No mouse, no keyboard, no monitor. People just need to get better at the game. Okay, well, if you're one of those people, my response to you is lament. Anyway, here's what's going on with the current Abyss cycle on floor 12 in 3.5. So in Chamber 1 first half, you have Eremites who are basically just punching bags. They aren't really threats if you can dodge their attacks. Then you have the new Cryo Abyss Herald who honestly isn't that much of a threat either. As long as you don't get hit constantly by his attacks, you should be fine. Since you have to break through a decently large Cryo Shield, I recommend bringing Pyro or Electro in the first half, as it'll also be helpful for Chamber 3. I did try Dendro on the first half, and while it can work, it's a bit harder to pull off, so I would just stick with the other 2 elements. Then, on the second half, you have more Eremites. They aren't really much of a threat, so you can just deal with them quite easily. Then afterwards, you have 2 Hydro Abyss Heralds to deal with. To deal with these 2, any element can work on the second half, as Hydro Shield is a lot easier to deal with. Overall, for Chamber 1, nothing too crazy here. No enemy is really that lethal as long as you can manage to keep your character safe with a shield or healing. Now moving on to Chamber 2, you have Mago Kenki to deal with on the first half. He's kind of a punching bag, much like the Jade Plume Terrorshroom, but is much more lethal. I would recommend bringing a shield if you don't know how to dodge his attacks. Other than that, he's mostly just a single target DPS check where you have to occasionally dodge his big damage. He's been in the Spiral Abyss multiple times, so I'm sure he's not too bad to deal with at this point. As for the second half, you basically have a bunch of Serpent Knights to deal with, including the new one that looks like Reinhardt from Overwatch. Anyway, if I'm being honest, I really don't know what these guys even do, other than they might charge at you occasionally. If you can manage to move around or use a shield to tank their attacks, they are similar to the Eremites, not really that hard to deal with. On this half though, you do have to be careful with the shockwaves on the ground because those actually do a sizable amount of damage to yourself, so if you're not careful, your character can die pretty quickly. So Chamber 2 is not really that difficult. You just have Mago Kenki to deal with, and then some Ruin Serpents. Really not that difficult. And finally, Chamber 3. This is where everyone goes bald. So for the first half, like I mentioned earlier, I recommend using Pyro or Electro simply due to the fact that you have Cryo Shields to deal with. It's not necessary, but it does speed up the process. There is a Ruin Guard to deal with first, so nothing crazy here. This monster has been in the game since the beginning. And then you have 2 Cryo Lava Turtles. As long as you don't get hit by their slams, they're pretty easy to deal with. If you're really having trouble, bring a Cryo Shield. And now this is what most of you have probably come for. The second half of Chamber 3. This Wenut. It's so bad to fight that I'm going to make a Sino joke. Hey guys, we should tell Hoyoverse that we not happy with this Abyss lineup. Get it? Wenut sounds like we not. We not means us players. No? Not funny? Anyway, this boss is basically just a patience simulator. It spends most of its time underground with not a lot of opportunity to directly damage it. The worst part about this boss being in the Abyss is the fact that it's not a difficult boss, it's just really annoying to fight. It's essentially just a DPS check without much time to actually attack the boss. Another bad thing about this boss is that characters who rely on their burst while on field to deal damage suffer greatly. Characters like Sino, Ito, and Xiao come to mind. By the time you set up your buffs and use your burst on field, the Wenut goes underground and stays there for all eternity before surfacing back up, only for your buff to basically be gone. Also, it's 90% Anemo resistant in the Abyss, so Xiao just suffers even more than he already does.
Lament!
For those of you who remember the Ruin Serpent being in the Abyss all the way back in 2.8, maybe we treated it a little bit too harshly. The Wenut has taken the title as the most irritating boss to be put in the Spiral Abyss. So basically, the 3.5 Abyss cycle is really not that difficult. It's mostly just a DPS check while occasionally having to dodge some lethal attacks from Magukenki or the Cryo Lava Turtles. Other than that, it's a pretty poorly designed Abyss layout. And the Weenut Chamber is basically a waiting game rather than a challenge. I hope they never bring this boss back again. The whole point of Spiral Abyss, and especially floor 12, is to be challenging. But when you place bosses like the Weenut, it's really not challenging, more of just a patience simulator. So hopefully Hoyoverse learns from this, probably not. But if they do, hopefully they'll put monsters that aren't super boring, and they'll put monsters that actually require challenge, because that's what the Spiral Abyss is all about. Anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching.